You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first out of 93 WIBC. And I must come clean with you guys just right off the top, just in case there are any unfortunate surprises. Because I broadcast the show out of Indiana, and because this show is live, there is not exactly a small chance that our power is knocked out. And if that's the case, if the lights suddenly go out and the stream ends for those who are on the radio, for those who are watching on TV or on the live streams as it's happening, don't worry. I have not been swatted. We work very close with our police departments to make sure that doesn't happen. The power's just gone out, and the battery backups that we've ordered for the studio are not here yet. So now that transparency is out of the way, let's get to a bit of transparency on a completely different issue, and that is Liberation Day, according to the Trump administration, has arrived. The massive wall of tariffs, and it is a wall for sure, has now been delivered via these charts. Trump has signed these into order, into the executive order under this presidential authority to declare tariffs as a matter of national security or an emergency. And after a very big event with a lot of American workers in the pro-MAGA crowd today, Trump brought forward what he has been talking about for not just months, what Trump has been talking about for decades. Check it out.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day, waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. We're going to make it wealthy, good and wealthy.
Now, the president is very excited about tariffs. He thinks that they generate lots of wealth over time. He thinks back to the McKinley tariffs of over 100 years ago. And they are a viable economic policy, especially if there are not a lot of other taxes already in place, and especially if you do not have the kind of failing industries that are propped up that people aren't getting a lot out of. Now, here's where the transparency comes in. Neither you, nor I, nor the Trump administration, respectfully, nor the populists on the more right side of the Republican Party, the traditional conservatives, the establishment, more corporatist Republicans, nor the Democrats, the Libertarians, nor anyone out there has any idea how this is going to work out. Not a one of us do. Now, there are a lot of people, and many of whom are my friends, both on the right, colleagues of mine over at the Heritage Foundation, like E.J. Ansoni, who are very pro the tariffs. There are colleagues and friends of mine, like the Daniel DiMartinos and such, who are very, very against the tariffs and are more for kind of a global trade economy. Neither of them is clairvoyant. They're both excellent guys. And a lot of my colleagues on the right side of the aisle who are economic experts are brilliant when it comes to analyzing what is coming down the pike, and they have good reasons for believing that the tariffs are great. There are some that have good reason for believing that the tariffs should only be used as a leverage point, and then there are some that have good reasons that say tariffs should be avoided like the plague. I am not one of those people. My degree is in education, science education. My expertise in policy usually relates to the clear reading of the Constitution, how policy is put into practice, and I've been brushing up on my foreign policy to go with some of my more cultural and enforcement areas of expertise. Now, why would I as a host discredit myself right off the top of the bat by saying, I am not the world's foremost tariff economic expert? Shouldn't you be? Shouldn't you just do the research and, come to us? I've got a different philosophy on how I do the show. You can tune into any show that you want, anytime, where the host is going to sit down and tell you, I know everything all the time. And then, much like Jim Cramer over on CNBC, can be proven wrong right on the spot. So instead of me telling you, I'm right, and this is exactly how this one's going to shake down, over the next couple of days, we're going to bring in experts. Tomorrow, we're bringing in E.J. Ansoni. We're going to be bringing in experts on the pro side of the tariffs, on the not so pro side of the tariffs, and we're going to walk through why they believe what they believe while we're keeping you up to date on the market, because I think that's how best to serve you, the audience who's tuning into the show. If you don't like it, please send a photocopy of your middle finger to tonykinnett.com. We've got a place for you to send things into us, texts and images. I would love for you to hear how you're, leaving us for someone who knows absolutely everything at all times. So let's dig into this here. What are these tariffs? What countries are a part of them? What can we expect? Here's the stuff that we do know. The Trump administration handed out these charts. Elizabeth Mitchell, our White House correspondent, was there. A lot of other friends and colleagues were there. And they started handing out photocopies of these charts that came down, printed a couple of days ago, because some of these things have already changed by the times these charts were released. And these charts, there are several pages of them. I think about 8 or 9 of them in total. Includes a name of a country. At the top, it says reciprocal tariffs. And Trump's big take on here is that we're charging these countries as much as they are charging us, or a little bit less. Kind of a compassionate, more relaxed tariff is how the president is portraying it, but still is trying to tariff countries that have tariffs on us. On the left side, it says tariffs charged to the United States. And then it also includes a little proviso here that says also these percentages include like currency manipulation and other trade deficit style things that are factored in. And then on the right, here's what the United States discounted reciprocal tariffs are going to be. So China, the Trump administration alleges that China imposes a 67% tariff/trade deficit with the United States. And so therefore, we're going to be tariffing China 34%. The European Union, 39%. Therefore, the United States is going to reciprocate with a 20% tariff. Vietnam, a 90% on import of U.S. goods. 46% from the U.S. on Vietnam imported goods. So expect clothing and other various sundries that have made in Vietnam on them to go up considerably. Taiwan, 64%, reciprocated with 32%, and on down. It does not go below 10%. So there are a couple of countries, in fact, there are several countries, which have 10% on their tariff on goods of the United States, that the United States then reciprocates with 10%. And that doesn't quite work. For example, Morocco and El Salvador specifically, as well as the United Arab Emirates, don't actually have 10% tariffs on the United States. So it doesn't quite work there. We have to assume, if the Trump administration is being forthright in what it is that they're providing to the American people as rationale for these tariffs, that this is calculated in other ways alongside other deficits. Now, there are a few issues with this. And the issues with this would be that because the left column isn't really tariff rates at all, it's simply stating the trade deficits kind of in general. And that makes things really in flux, really difficult to work out of a negotiation with the country to hopefully bring tariffs down and restore a decent brokerage of peace in the economic front with the other country. So that kind of stuff is still up in the air. And by the way, here's a great example. The listed tariff rate for South Korea is 50%. But South Korea only tariffs U.S. goods imported at 0.79%, less than 1% tariff on U.S. goods. But the U.S. lists South Korea's tariff as 50%. So again, that's a kind of a pseudo explanation of what the Trump administration is calling a trade deficit, because South Korea imports I got that wrong here. I got that flipped around. The United States imports $131.5 billion worth of goods from South Korea, but only exports $65.5 billion worth of goods to South Korea. So there's that deficit in hand. And it's a little weird to make that the defining term. The idea that just because a country's not buying as much from the United States as we're buying from them, different parts of the world have different markets that produce different kinds of goods. So again, putting my final judgment on that particular rationale on hold. Here is Trump preparing his administration for the criticisms from who he calls the globalists. Radio crew will catch up with you guys in a second. We'll continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. So here is President Trump saying that over the next couple of days, you're going to hear some complaints from the globalists.
In the coming days, there will be complaints from the globalists and the outsourcers and special interests and the fake news. Always, the fake news will always complain. But Never forget, every prediction our opponents made about trade for the last 30 years has been proven totally wrong. They were wrong about NAFTA. They were wrong about China. They were wrong about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would have been a disaster if I didn't terminate it. If I didn't terminate that, United Auto Workers, you would have had no jobs in this country.
Now, while the no jobs in this country there's a little bit of an asterisk on that. It would have absolutely hurt the American auto manufacturing industry. There are two quick notes. First of all, Trump is right about economic predictions from those in the United States who have been more a fan of a globalist trade economy, to the point of no tariffs at all. And if steel, needs to head over to ownership by Japan, that's totally fine. If something is going to be only produced in China, that's totally fine. The hyper-globalist trade perspective has not made good economic predictions. He's correct when he says that. And number two, when Trump says that he was left with a lot of really garbage policies, that is also true, with a small asterisk being that Trump negotiated the United States-Canada-Mexico Free Trade Agreement in his first term. And that's important because right now, Mexico and Canada have agreed to eliminate tariffs with the United States. So again, a quid pro quo in tariffs. A lot of people are saying that's a win. That's Mexico and Canada caving. Some are saying that's just because of the USMCA agreement that's already around, because USMCA compliant goods between the two countries will continue to see a 0% tariff, which was already on the books. So it's a good thing. But as to claiming that this is some kind of a brand new victory, that's a little bit up for debate. Now, India and Israel have agreed to drop all tariffs whatsoever if the United States agrees to drop all tariffs. So while on the chart right now, India and Israel are subject to tariffs on the United States, it's very likely that the United States will be dropping those tariffs on India and Israel because as allies of the United States, India more of an economic ally, Israel obviously a more military ally, then in those two particular instances, the United States is likely to drop those tariffs. So as far as looking ahead to the United States tariff policies, whether Trump treats this more like Herbert Hoover tariff policies or the McKinley era, there are a lot of things yet to be seen. Now, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that there is likely to be a detox period after President Trump implements wide-ranging tariffs, and therefore the economy is going to struggle for a hot minute. You can already see this, by the way, in S&P as well as NASDAQ futures. S&P futures, back when producer Daniel sent me the data, was down 3.4%. NASDAQ futures were down 4%. Now it is down 3.5%, and the NASDAQ down 4.2%. Normally, you really only see about a 1 or 2% up or down on the futures on the given day. So tomorrow is likely to be a very rough day in the markets unless there's good news that comes out for the markets and those with international commodities trading on certain reciprocal deals being brokered. And so we're going to see what this detox period looks like. The United States people regarding the economy are typically not patient. So we're going to have to see what that looks like. In a minute, we're going to talk about the special elections over with Mary Rooke of the Daily Caller. It's a 2-segment special here. It's really good. Stick around. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Be right back.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, joined by Mary Rooke over from the Daily Caller. And a lot of us were up last night into the late hours of the eve and the morn watching the results, which came in lickety-split over in Florida and not too terribly in Wisconsin, to a few results that I've heard quite a bit of spin on social media. Boy, I've heard about every single excuse from both sides of the aisle. I've seen about every face you can paint on this particular clown. I don't know if I buy any of it, Mary. What do you think?
No, I completely agree. I think that, it kind of went the way I expected it to go. I knew the two Republicans were going to replace our open seats there in Florida. Florida has been turning bright red. It's not purple. As much as the Democrats would like to believe there's a chance for them there, it's not. Like, Republicans are going to win that state. Voters there are energized. It's because they have a state government there that's energized. They want to be a part of the electorate. They want to be a part of the solution, not the problem. So they're going to come out and vote. Wisconsin is the same thing, but opposite. You have an electorate there that doesn't understand why they need to come out and vote, hasn't been given the reasons. We don't have a candidate that energizes them. Their state government is, breathing down their neck constantly, and people are moving out. So you really have to look at the Republican Party and ask yourself, why aren't they doing more? You can't go a week before the election and do an all-out push. This has got to be something that voters needed to know about in November, that this election was happening in March. And so although it's disappointing for the Republican Party, they really needed to be able to flip that Supreme Court seat over in order to ensure that they could keep their House seat and thus keep the majority in 2026. It's not surprising. I mean, you have a Republican Party that does not understand how to get out the vote.
And this is one of the things that concerns me. I was on an interview earlier today with Hammer and Nigel over on WIBC in Indianapolis that kind of struck a bit of a chord. People are trying to do a lot of tea leaf reading. For me, what this says is that the Republicans, and by that I mean the RNC, right, because they lead out the election efforts of Republicans, there has been this really silly idea that we can just run on Trump forever. Yeah. That if we just somehow glue Trump to everything, then, presto, I mean, it's going to be amazing. We're going to win every election ever. And that's stupid. And I'm not trying to be coddlesome. I don't want to be like soft-handed with this. That is dumb. It is ridiculous. It lost in 2022. And now here it lost in the special election since 2022. And it didn't carry certain seats it was supposed to in 24 because the Republican House majority ended up being so slim. Here we are again, more special elections, and Republicans are squeaking by in places because they don't take many elections seriously until, what did we say before the interview? Like a week and a half before the election?
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I completely agree with you. I think the reality is that Trump is that type of candidate. What he speaks about, the way he's able to resonate with the middle American voter, that is a once in a generation type of candidate. And so I'm not saying that every single candidate that has to come out has to be like that, but you have to be able to speak to the voter and you have to be able to energize them for the cause. And it's not just, oh, come out and vote for me. Hey, guess what? I'm pro Second Amendment. I'm pro-life. Come out and vote for me. It's got to be something that galvanizes a swath of voters. And the Republican Party is incapable of doing that at this moment. And it's the same reason why you saw Democrats lose, because it's like a party without a leader. Right now, we have a clear leader. It's obviously Donald Trump. But what Republican voters need to hear is, what is our plan for the future? Okay, fine. We have a Republican majority in the House and Senate right now, and we have a Republican president. But where is the party going? And how do we get it there? And I think that is the biggest issue that we are facing right now is, how do we tell them that this isn't just ending in 4 years, that this is going to keep on going and we need them part of the movement?
So this is the key that is to coaching, that is to being a boss at a company, that is to being in politics. If you want to be a good leader, there is a huge difference between just going out and stating the facts on the ground and painting a vision to where you are going with those facts. When I was a track coach, I was told that the most important style of coaching was not just making sure that the students that I was over were running this amount of laps a day, doing these amount of stretches, doing these special exercises, whatever, that I needed to paint a vision for where the team could go. And here we are in this, again, something Trump's been able to do. He gets out there and he paints a little bit hyperbolic, but he paints a vision. I will never forget when he did his re-election speech 4 years ago, or his re-election campaign speech 4 years ago. He said, "We're going to be the first country on Mars." And I thought, how long has it been since we've had a president who got out there and said, "See that off in the distance? That's the future. Let's move towards it." And it frustrates me to know. I mean, you can see, we don't have, interviews like this. I'm pissed. because what I see are Republicans get out there and go, "Oh, boy, that liberal, she's bad news." That is true. Boy, she's going to flip the House majority. Do you know what I hear a lot of Americans going? So what? So what? Every election, it's, oh, we got to stop the Republican. Oh, we got to stop the Democrats. Oh, we got to stop the liberals. And no one ever does anything.
Yeah.
I'm bored of it. And I'm bored of being told the same RNC nonsense. Like, oh, if we just would have knocked on a couple of doors. Scott Pressler picked up his shack in Pennsylvania and went to Wisconsin to do the full force campaign thing. It wasn't enough, guys.
Yeah. We've got to have leadership coming from the National Republican Party coming in there on all of these things. And now people will say, oh, well, they're spread thin. We've got all these things going on. We had those 2 races in Florida. Those 2 races in Florida were going to go Republicans' way. The majority of time and money should have been spent on this Wisconsin race because, like you said, it changes our ability to be able to control the House. And that is such an important thing that I don't think that the regular voter, like you said, they're either exhausted by it or they just don't care. But if the Republicans do not control the House, what ends up happening is the same thing that happened under Trump 1, where Nancy Pelosi got control and she stopped everything. Trump was fighting tooth and nail with impeachments. He was fighting tooth and nail to get any type of policy achievement done. And it slowed our ability to change this. And so if the polling is correct, and the American people are behind him when we talk about ending the waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government and doing the mass deportations and continuing to close down our southern border. All of that stuff has to run through the House. EOs are great. They're great. Okay. Like, yes, great. I'm so happy to see that Trump has signed another EO, but none of this stuff gets codified into law so that the next administration doesn't undo everything we've done these last 4 years unless we can get it through the House and the Senate. And right now Republicans are doing everything but giving voters what they want. And so we need, fighters in there. And in order to do that, it's like these state Supreme Court races seem like they're not connected, but everything like this is so connected and we have to get voters galvanized.
So let's talk about California, Wisconsin, and Florida here for just a minute and about voting and why individuals come out to vote in certain states and why they don't and where the parties have gone and become. And I realize this isn't the traditional, I ask a question and then you give me a really good answer. People are aware of that. This is just a 2-way conversation. Feel free to cut me off or interject at any time just to, just establish that here. In Florida, you have a state that is going in a positive direction. It is a state people are moving to because they expect it is going places. There is bold new legislation on cutting property taxes and cutting other kinds of taxation and giving people more of their rights down in Florida. So when you have a race, people come out to vote for Republicans because they're energized. They're like, wow, we're going places. The reasons Republicans don't come out in California to vote is because what's it going to change? The California Assembly is going to be just as blue. It's going to be just as terrible. Why bother? Now, what about a battleground state? As Hakeem Jeffries accurately pointed out, that Wisconsin is a 50-50 state. Didn't used to be, but it is now. And the reason that it is because both parties have turned into, I'm rubber, you're glue. Whatever you say bounces off me and sticks to you. So when was looking at, candidate ads up there, because I went to college in Wisconsin, I worked in Governor Walker's office. I checked in on this campaign, and it's a bunch of, nuh-uh, you're bad. On both sides. Republicans aren't going to come out and vote for that. I got a busy work life. You think that some Hispanic father from Delavan, Wisconsin, one of the larger immigrant communities, we talked to the founder of the Libre Initiative, who was pushing for Hispanic turnout in favor of Schimmel in Wisconsin. He's not going to come out there because you're having a junior higher, lunchroom schoolgirl drama patty cake slapping contest. That's not worth his time.
No, it's absolutely not. And that is the whole point. So when you talk about California, it's the same in Wisconsin. You have to think about how close the race was in Wisconsin. Trump won it by 1% in 2024. And it truly is one of those, battleground states where it could either go Republican or Democrat. And right now, the state government in Wisconsin is breathing down the neck of every single resident there. And so they're already exhausted. The moment they wake up in the morning, they're exhausted. They're exhausted by the regulations. They're exhausted about worrying about whether or not their kids are going to get transed in the local public school. They're exhausted trying to fight the school system, all of these things. And then you say, hey, come out to our luncheon and hear why our guy is better than the other guy. And it's like, no, actually, that's not what you need to do. You need to give them a clear set of instructions. Listen, this is what happens if you don't come out and vote. You have to do it. You've got to galvanize them. It's like going into war. You think that a general is going to stand in front of, a battalion and say, well, guys, guess what? We're better than the other guys. So make sure you go on the front line and become cannon fodder for them. No, he's going to tell them they're brave. He's going to give them a reason to fight. He's going to remind them of their families. He's going to do all of these things. And then they're going to go out and, do feats that they wouldn't have been able to do earlier.
This is one of Vance's key strengths. And I say that as someone who rather through accident or because, I do see myself in him just a little bit here. He grew up in Middletown, Ohio. I grew up in Middletown, Indiana. Both of our families come from the same part of Kentucky. Both of us were in a large part, raised by our grandmothers. There's a lot of things that I understand with how he communicates in that Midwestern style and that poor industrial family base that rose above. I don't want to say rose above his station because the Midwestern industrial core of this country, he more in Appalachia, us more in kind of the Rust Belt side of things. That's not a station to rise above, but to achieve things beyond what you may have been told you could achieve as a child. That he does paint a vision for what he sees. And I disagree with him on foreign policy regarding what things the U.S. should and shouldn't be involved in and how. I'm more Teddy Rooseveltian imperialist, where he's a touch more isolationist. We might talk about a disagreement on the exactitudes of tariff policies and plans or automation in industry. But when he gets up there and he starts speaking, a picture forms in your mind without you even trying of what this country could be.
Yep.
And you want to get out there and go. You want to follow after that. That's why he beat the crap out of Tim Walz.
Absolutely. You want to fight for that. And so when we talk about the future of the party, we need to be, putting out candidates that do that and are capable of doing that. We're done with the Mitch McConnells of the world. We're done with the Lindsey Grahams of the world. Those are the arcane figures that used to control the Republican Party. And so when you roll out someone like that for people to vote for, what's appetizing to them on that? How are they supposed to believe that this person is going to fight for their family at the basic level and ensure that they can rise above whatever, societal pressures have told them they're not going to be able to do? And, although JD Vance is a man, I do see myself a lot in him as well. We come from that generation where, a lot of the boys that I went to high school with, they went off to war. And they either didn't come back or they came back completely changed. It's these ideas that, that our elected officials have sold our birthright. And, you talk about painting a picture. I couldn't agree more. Him and Trump, they both do such an excellent job of not only painting the picture of where we stand right now as a country, but like you said, the future. And it gives you something that you want to, buckle down, get in the fight, put your weight behind that machine in order to push it over the line. Without that, you get race outcomes like we saw in Wisconsin yesterday.
We'll be back in just a second to continue breaking down this election night with Mary Rooke, where the party was, where it's going, how things need to change. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Just a curbside prophet with my hand in my pocket.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast, a special double segment with the one, the only Mary Rooke of the Daily Caller, two analysts, two loudmouths on the airwaves and with our pens on social media, breaking down a night that should feel victorious. A 3 out of 4 victory isn't bad. and instead has a lot of whistling past the graveyard vibes to it. What boggles my mind is that we had the opportunity to show vision, and the one small opportunity that Republicans took, it blew out the alternative. Case in point being, in Wisconsin, referendum to change the Constitution on the ballot said, do you want to require photo ID for voting in the future? And what was the final tally? Like 60-30?
Right. It overwhelmingly won.
Massive. I mean, it's so easy to paint a vision.
Because you know what? Voter ID speaks to so many different topics. What it means to be an American voter, what it means to be an American, discounting illegal immigration out of our voting systems, the census, all of these issues, who can vote in this election? Republicans had a chance here. They could have galvanized the voting base who came out and said, guess what? We want voter ID. This is very important to us. We want to make sure our elections are secure, and tag their candidate to them. But they didn't. I was getting text messages from people in Wisconsin. Do you want to vote for Crawford? This is what Crawford is going to do. And then I'd get one, from the Republican candidate. Do you want to vote? And it's, you sit there and you look at this and you're like, what message is this playing to? Like, who is buying this and going, oh, you know what? I'm going to get out of my, it's been raining today. It's been cold today, whatever. I'm going to get out and I'm going to go in line and I'm going to vote. Not a bit of it. But if you sent them a text message that said, guess what? Voter ID is on the line. And while you are voting for that, I need you to go ahead and put a vote in for Brad because we need him in office too. It's so simple that a kindergartner can do it. And yet our national GOP is failing to get these types of, galvanizing votes in.
It bewilders me to look at the results for the election. So the tallies that we have here, 95% estimated reporting. Susan Crawford, 55%, 1.3 million votes. To Brad Schimmel, 1.06 million votes, down at 45%. And I'm looking here for the exact numbers over in like the referendum that was shared for. Hold on here. Let me look. I got to look up these particular election results. I'm not going to be happy. I'm trying to Google them. Google won't let me, and it's driving me bonkers.
Yeah, I saw yesterday. Everybody was trying to figure out like which county.
It says the issue passes. All right, here it is. All right, get ready for this. Yes, in favor of photo ID, 62.8%, 1.43 million votes. No, 37.3%, 852,000 votes. The only counties that voted no on photo ID were Dane County, which is Madison, and Milwaukee County.
That's where the University of Wisconsin is, right?
So that's where I used to. It's where I used to audit classes.
Do you see why I get so frustrated? I cannot understand. This is so simple that you and I, who are not in that business, who are not sending out the text messages, who are not doing that, can see how clear it is to tag it to that.
We pointed this out last night on the show. I played a clip of Hakeem Jeffries talking about the candidates. All right, he claimed Susan Crawford as the Democrat candidate. He made it very clear the whole party stood behind. And by the way, now that she's won, they're all going to claim that she's nonpartisan and impartial. She's upholding the whatever. And that, of course, is nonsense. During the campaign, I'm so tired of this. Oh, this school board candidate is nonpartisan. This judge is not. Everything in an election is partisan. Either play by the rules of the game or quit.
Yeah,
do you want to win? Or do you want to come in second place due to bad messaging and optics in senator committees where they're like, the internet is a series of tubes on the Facebook? Like, that's going to win anything.
Right. I could not agree more. You have to have your messaging go, I'm Republican, I vote for this. If not, then voters are going to see your signs in yards and they're going to go, well, I don't really know who to vote for, so I'm not going to go out and vote. You have to explicitly tell them, this is a Republican, we need your vote. Also vote to pass voter ID. It's not that difficult.
So I again, there's so many analysts out there that are saying this and that, and I'm sure that as this interview is playing, the comment sections over on the live streams are full of the hot takes of individuals who, again, their perspectives on what they saw, is frustrating, is exciting, whatever. Going forward, I'm going to break into the meta here a little bit and ask you just outright, when you try to analyze these situations, and politics is about building coalition strategies, when we run into people who do have their heads either in the sand or up the butt, between a rock and a hard place, to put it a little more in a friendlier way, perhaps, how do you try to convince those individuals who do have influence, who do have scope and power per se, that are going to make perhaps a bigger impact than you or I are going to make with your political writing and analysis or your appearances on TV and media, whatever they may be? How are you convincing, and I'm not looking for a perfect answer here, because I don't even know what I would answer this question as. How are you trying to convince them that what they're doing, they need to either knock it off and get with the program and start building for the future instead of November of 24?
I think that there's a lot of people that are not only currently elected, but that run our party right now still believe that there's a chance that they will be able to go back to the Republican Party of old. And so I think my pitch to them is that party is dead. The voters killed it November 2024. If you want power, which all these men do, that's the basis of the reason why they're running these machines. If you want power, then you have to have voters. And if you continue to put these milquetoast candidates in, then every single ounce of power that you have right now will be stripped away from you by a machine that hates you, that wants to end your way of life, and will ensure that not only do you not get the Republican Party of old, but you will have no party of consequence. You will have no seat at the table. You have no ability to enact the policies that you want. So my ask of them is, at what point do you cut your loss and you start joining the movement that is actually here to fight for the future of America?
I think that's really on the nose. I hate that we're out of time because there are so many people in the spaces that, I don't know if you'd call competitors, colleagues, whatever, different outlets, the dailies, whether they're the Daily Wire, the Caller, the Signal, whatever, whom I read your work in the morning, and I really love what it is that you bring to the table. And I'm really excited to see what it is that you guys are doing over there in the future. Thank you so much for taking a minute to just stop by and, break down what is. It's like when your toddler dumps a cup of their drink on the floor. It was an unneeded error. Yeah. It just happened for no reason. You're like, dude, I just gave you that. Why'd you dump it on the floor? Why? We gave you the cup. Why? I don't know. It's cathartic to talk about that.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks so much for having me, Tony. Honestly, I'll be on anytime.
We'll be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, let's talk for just a second here as we switch back over to kind of the quick news of the day about a story I didn't get a chance to talk about. This would be one that's particularly, it matters a whole lot to me as a Midwestern Hoosier with a heart for justice and, of course, owning the libs. And one of those things that has been missing from the United States Senate in Indiana over the last couple of years, where I'm broadcasting from, is senators who are willing to go out there and just not take the left seriously. And when I mean not take the left seriously, I don't mean in elections. I mean when you are chased around by angry activists, you don't cower or not say anything or, pretend, well, if I just don't see them, they won't see me, and then they won't bother me, and then I won't be on CNN this evening. Jim Banks, who was a phenomenal representative, then ran for Senate and has been a stellar senator so far in a lot of different ways. One of the ways that he's done a phenomenal job is regarding military families. We're going to talk about that. I have a new piece up today, an exclusive over from the offices of Senators Ted Cruz and Jim Banks that we'll get to. But in the moment, I want to talk about the unfathomable bliss it brings me to watch an individual who was fired from the Department of Health and Human Services, a complete nobody who has done nothing for a single soul in this country of any value, follow Jim Banks around and whine at him about why he was fired, and then Jim Banks look at him and go, I don't care. And I didn't cover this on the show last night because I wanted to look into the guy a little bit more. But for those who haven't heard it or seen it yet, here is Jim Banks and the grumpy staffer.
Hi, I was a worker at HHS. I was fired illegally on February 14th. There are many people who are not getting social service programs, especially people with disabilities. Are you going to do anything to stop what's happening?
You probably deserved it.
I deserved it?
You probably deserved it.
I deserved it.
That's
wow.
Rude and sad.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Why did I deserve it?
Because you seem like a clown.
Okay, sir, you shouldn't have said that.
I love that. So I love two things there that are just amazing. First of all, the elevator door closing, as many pointed out, peak amazing comedy. In fact, it actually kind of reminds me of that directed by Michael Bay meme. And so,
You probably I deserved it. I deserved it. Wow. Yeah, that's great to hear. Why did I deserve it?
I'm sorry, I can't help it. That meme brings me so much joy. It's a great line. There is one other reason that I enjoy this video. The anguish, the pain, and the suffering of theater children. I love it. It's just fantastic. It is an amazing part of this country. It's just wonderful to see. And we're going to talk a little bit about the theater children's angst here. You have the girl going, well, you shouldn't have said that, mister. Boy, we've got you fair and square. And the guy going, well, I was illegally fired. You serve at the pleasure of the president. In the executive agencies, the chief executive gets to decide whom is hired and fired, unless you're a secretary level and you need to be appointed and confirmed by the Senate. But other than that, illegally fired. We're going to talk about who this goober is in just a second. We got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. And there's a few other reasons, this being one of them, why the Democrats are not going to be able to respond in any consistent way. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on The Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett cast on 93 WIBC.
So, Jim Banks, Senator, this kid comes after him and he's like, I was illegally fired. And then, Banks not being cowed, because this guy has, according to several sources, been following people around so that, he's known on site as someone who follows someone around and holds a camera up. Sir, did you know, sir, that I was illegally fired, sir? I'm very important. And then he has his theater, goober in the background going, yeah, and you need to... Yeah, you bet you regret saying that on camera. And the libs tried to make this a really big deal. So Jake Tapper, in his infinite wisdom, when he's not defaming veterans, brought on Jim Banks onto his show last night and tried to, guilt Banks about this comment. Here's how that went.
I want to ask you about this exchange you had yesterday in the halls of the Senate, an exchange with a former federal employee from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services who approached you. The exchange went viral. Here's a little bit of it.
Social, great to hear. Why did I deserve it?
Because you seem like a clown.
So in a statement to CNN asked about it, you said, quote, I have no sympathy for left-wing activists who have been let go from overpaid positions that should have never existed. I do have sympathy for the hardworking Hoosiers whose tax dollars have been wasted on bankrolling those positions, unquote. This former federal employee was on CNN a little bit earlier today. Listen to what he had to say.
I was just asking, what are you doing about the social services that are being cut?
Look at this guy. Every single I swear, I'm going to make this explicitly clear. Every guy in DC who works for a federal official on the left looks exactly like this. If you put Harry Sisson, David Hogg, and this guy right next to each other in a lineup, the witness would not be able to tell you who scuffed their shiny dress shoes. This is bonkers. Every single one looks exactly like this. So he's very upset, anyway, very, very important federal employee, this one.
Specifically for people with disabilities, and his response was just that I deserve to get fired. In response to the piece about left-wing activism, as a federal employee, much like all of other civil servants, I am nonpartisan.
Do you have any evidence that he's a left-wing activist? Do you have any idea of what kind of work he was doing at HHS?
Yeah, here's what I know, Jake. He's an instigator. He's in the hallways of the Senate office buildings every day, chasing down Republicans like me and cheering for Democrats who walk through the hallways. So it doesn't take a whole lot here to deduce from that. He is a left-wing activist. And what I have no tolerance for is anyone who believes they are entitled to a taxpayer-funded job. In this case, we know that he made between somewhere $85,000 to $100,000 a year for a job that he can't even explain.
Now, here is something that I quite enjoy. See, we looked up this guy. His name is Mac Schroeder. And while many of the liberal outlets have called him a budget analyst, anytime they use the exact same terminology for a position that is definitely not what that was called, the sniff test doesn't pass. And so we did a little looking, and on his LinkedIn, the business version of Facebook, which is horrible in each and every way, which he has now deleted, by the way, not suspicious at all, it says that he was a social science analyst for the Administration for Community Living. He focused on community-centered policy analyst, and also on this now deleted LinkedIn, because a lot of the search engine optimization, if you search this guy over on the search engines, it still shows you snippets of his LinkedIn page that have not been scrubbed from Google or DuckDuckGo's cache. They keep temporary caches to make search engine histories a lot quicker. And this is my favorite part. He's interested in housing justice. And for those of you who aren't quite aware, housing justice means he's interested in spending government money to give your hardworking tax dollars to those who don't want to pay for housing, to those who don't want to work, and suggest that the reason people can't afford homes is because the government hasn't built enough publicly available housing. So the high regulation stuff that doesn't let normal people build homes, but the government assistant homes that always go to crap in about 3.8 years, if they last that long. It's hilarious. So yeah, turns out Mr. Federal Nonpartisan guy, wow, he is in fact a guy who would look over community data and then say how much more money the federal government needed to be spending to achieve left-wing housing justice aims. Again, because the idea of justice, he's not just interested in housing development. The idea of housing justice means that there are groups in the country who are disenfranchised, who are oppressed in the housing market, and it's so much harder for them to get housing than those straight white Christian males. And so, yeah, it turns out the guy was a left-wing activist whose job is not necessary at all for health and human services. So, fantastic, very much appreciated. Thanks for that, Senator Banks. Keep up the good work. And that brings us over to why I believe, at least from looking at the data regarding the special elections, and then more so the tariffs right now, and whether or not the tariffs end up being a huge benefit for the American economy, kind of meh, or bad for the U.S. economy, the Democrats are not going to be able, based on current trends, to flip this around for 2026 as a victory. They're not going to. And the reason is because the left right now is running around like a group of drunk geese honking at each other. Case in point is Representative Jasmine Crockett, because we got a couple more Jasmine Crockett clips from Dallas, who has just announced that the only reason she was ever hired for any kind of a law position was because of her skin color, which is, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to be honest with you guys. That's quite the thing to admit. I don't know if I would have said such a thing.
Say because you've been gracious. Is this. When I first became a public defender, I had no criminal defense experience. And I walked in and I told my boss, Charlie, I said, listen, you should hire me. He said, why? I said, because I'm black. Charlie looked at me like I was crazy.
Yeah, because that's a crazy thing to say after Republicans have been making the case that there are individuals who were not hired for their merit or their skill, but because of their skin color, coming out and admitting to the entire country you're a DEI hire is in fact not good for the party who claims that isn't happening anywhere. But then, Jasmine Crockett's also struggling still because she made a point to mock Byron Donalds for marrying a white woman, because interracial marriages, I was told that that's something that shouldn't matter. You should marry whomever you love and who have common values with. Color shouldn't matter there. And now you have individuals like Jasmine Crockett making it very clear that, she thinks that Byron Donalds is a cuck who walks around doing whatever quote unquote massa says, referring to his wife, Erica Donalds. Horribly racist thing. And after being called out on it, now she's pretending that it's so unfair for people to suggest that she not be an openly racist dirtbag.
MAGA there's nothing that I could ever say or do that would make MAGA be like, that's our girl, right? Because
you criticize individuals for their skin color?
First of all, ton of racist. So never happening.
The gaslighting.
Right?
The gaslighting. Oh, incredible. Then you have individuals on the pundit side like Ellie Mistel, who gets on MSNBC and says we need to go even further to the left, that even if there were members of gangs like MS-13 and Tren de Aragua that are captured who are illegal, they shouldn't be deported. We shouldn't be getting rid of them.
About their status. And just to slightly push back on Mark, even if you tell me and you prove that they're gang members, I'm not so sure that I'm okay with them being sent off to be tortured in a foreign country, but I'll leave that aside.
That is incredible stuff. Incredible stuff. To make the case that your party has not yet moved to the left enough is why the Democrats are not going to be able to figure it out. They're not going to be able to figure out how to all get in a line and say what Trump is doing is not popular. And I had a debate this morning with a left-wing guy over on Dr. Phil's Merritt Street, where we came to a bit of an impasse where he couldn't really slam tariffs because they're very heavily favored by unions, which is a left-wing position. And he couldn't really criticize the domestic terror of Tesla because he had to excuse the actions as like justified political anger. And there's one other key area that Republicans are going to be able to exploit to make sure that those on the left aren't able to rally before 2026. We're going to talk about that over on some bonus tonus on the show on the live stream. Radio folks, take care. Have an excellent evening. We'll see you real soon. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. All right, time for just a smidgen of bonus tonus this evening. And it all comes down to a piece that I wrote this morning. The latest bill filed by Senator Jim Banks and Senator Ted Cruz is an education savings account bill that would allocate part of the education funding in this country to allow military families the option to send their students wherever. There would be education savings accounts. So instead of spending federal money on the Baltimore public school system, if there is a serviceman whose family is in or near Maryland, near Baltimore, they could then choose to send their child to a different school. It's an education savings account. It's a part of school choice. And the left, who is extremely resolutely against school choice of any kind, is never going to allow this bill to pass. It will need at least 60 votes in the Senate. That won't happen, despite being a very popular issue among all demographics except white women. And the Democrats haven't understood the idea that Americans really don't care for forced public school nonsense for a couple of decades. The public schooling system in this country, by and large, as a required system, has failed. And teachers' unions have very much helped that along the way. But here are Senators Ted Cruz and Jim Banks making the case that just perhaps we should treat our military families with enough respect to say you don't really have a choice in where you live because you are stationed in this particular area. And so because that's a very difficult thing, we would like to make sure that you are one of the first beneficiaries of a federal school choice program, because school choice is objectively, by the data, a better method of ensuring a good education for a child, especially in a low-income family, because right now only upper-income families and rich families can afford school choice in areas where there aren't voucher programs. So, what Cruz and Banks are forcing Democrats to do is tell the country that they don't care about military families. Because right now what you have is a lot of Democrats who are promising, preening over the Mike Waltz scandal. Oh, he had a personal email address that he didn't share any classified information on, that he accepted a calendar invite on. Oh, no. And oh, no, that Jeff Goldberg was added to a group chat. Oh, man, that it was about a Houthi strike with like no details about who was being struck and where and by whom. But, oh, classified stuff. And they're trying to say, oh, these Republicans don't care if troops, if they die. But then if Republicans turn around and say, okay, well then will you give benefits to military families? And the Democrats vote no, that is very hard to shake off to the American people. Because now Republicans have, as we talked about a little earlier, they have a bit of that vision. We want to provide a better life than currently exists in this country for military families. We want to provide a better life for Americans than streets that are run down with violent illegal immigrants. We want those who come into this country legally to have the full services awarded to them and not see those services awarded to those who cut in line. That's painting a vision. That makes it easier for a Republican Party to unify and say, this is what you could have. The Democrats won't let you have it. Simply pointing at the Democrats and saying, yeah, but they want to trans the kids. By the way, that is a true thing, according to policies like in California, where carcinogenic hormonal treatments are prescribed to children that permanently sterilize, or of course, the whole cancer and death thing. Those are an issue that you can definitely point to the left and say, hey, you need to come out and vote for us, or else your state will look like California. The problem is that doesn't work. That works right after a presidential, or that works in the middle of a presidential race in which the offending administration is the defense. Kamala Harris, as a vocal champion of the LGBTQ stuff and the open border stuff during the Biden administration, could not then turn around and defend that, as well as like the inflation and the hyper regulation, like the EV mandate and the Build Back Better plan and the huge amount of money to broadband connections that never went to anyone and things like that. Then that becomes a referendum people are willing to vote against because they don't want 4 more years of this. And the first Trump administration was wildly successful on the economy front, on the foreign policy front. So the idea was giving Trump more reign on things like illegal immigration was a good vision to shoot for. And Trump paints a vision because Trump gets out there and he says something hyperbolic. It's going to be great. We're going to grab Mars and we're going to get Greenland. And also Canada's the 51st state and it's going to be amazing. You're all going to be a part of it. While that is Trump's classic blustering style, that is appealing as a vision, especially when your alternative is either Delaware, America, or, well, the process of the moment in time. Those two alternatives to Trump meant Trump's providing a vision and not just going on the Call Her Daddy podcast. All right, we'll stick around. We'll tune in for this. Now what Republicans have to do is on the congressional level and the state and local level, they have to kind of get out there and say, hey, this is what we want for the American people. This is what we can provide as something to move toward. And also, when that particular vision is put in front of Americans, like the tariffs, for example, it's very popular with Americans when they see that more auto manufacturing and chip manufacturing and medical manufacturing are moving their industries back to the United States, like Hyundai or like Mercedes-Benz, like Hyundai or Honda or Toyota. Or when you look at the manufacturing industry for microprocessing chips, like TMSC from Taiwan, when you have industries coming back, that is an example of tariffs doing something, or the threat of tariffs doing something great that brings business back to the United States. Now Americans are going to be looking to see how this impacts the market. And if it works, again, putting a vision forward and then acting on that vision is appealing to voters. Just saying, well, my opponent is a purple-haired, crazy transgender dog from Miami, as the rally just showed. I mean, yeah, that is effective if that individual has already been in Congress on the ballot and it's a presidential election. But if it's not, Americans don't really come out to vote for that. That isn't enough. Going to vote is like going to the DMV. It's annoying. It's not something anyone wants to do. And so you have to, that's a bar, right? That is a mental bar one has to jump in order to actually go do the thing. So the political candidate, you have to give someone a reason to come out to vote for you. Brad Schimmel did not do that in Wisconsin. Nope. I'm not Susan Crawford. Okay. And what else? There needs to be something else that you can deliver. And that's going to be the key question that Republicans will have to answer. Democrats can't provide a vision because Trump has actually moved into their left territory on things like tariffs. The left is a fan of trade protectionism. So Trump can't really move, the left can't really move to the left of Trump there without just going full socialism. That's what Bernie and AOC are doing. They can't really outmaneuver Trump on immigration because it's popular. The sob stories aren't working. And also, it turns out the people that are part of their sob stories are members of MS-13 anyway. They can't outmaneuver Trump on medical stuff because they screwed up on COVID and they screwed up on the LGBTQ plus 2IA stuff. So what else do they have? Right now, that's just Cory Booker yelling how inadequate he is on the floor of the Senate, filibustering nothing for 24 and a half hours. So those things are going to be the key things to look out for over the next couple of months. You're going to see the Democrats make very vague statements about the economy, but without any kind of plan, like as an alternative. Then you're going to see the Trump administration, and most likely like Scott Bessent, recognize the impact of the tariffs. They're going to have to issue some kind of an explanation of some questionable ways that the numbers were calculated as to what certain countries do and don't provide. Again, like how right now it appears the tariffs charged to the USA number really might just be the trade deficit divided by the US import, which that is quite a way to tally such a number up. We're going to talk about that more with some experts tomorrow, both pro tariffs, against tariffs, give you guys the best of both sides of the stuff, whereas everywhere else, there's probably going to be a lot of yelling. Take care. Have an excellent evening. If you are in the part of the country dealing with the storms, take care, and please stay safe. Don't stand out on the front porch too long watching the storm roll in, even though we really, really want to. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.